I destroyed everything, my marriage, my family, my dignity, for fleeting moments that should have never happened. I let loneliness become an excuse. Let desire override decency. I watched Clinton's face break. Saw the boy in Archie crumble. And still, I didn't stop. Now I sit alone in a quiet house I poisoned. Replaying what I did. There's no one to blame but me. I chose this. And I'll live with the wreckage I created, every shameful, irreversible second of it. Clinton had been absent long before he ever boarded that plane. We shared walls, meals, and calendars, but not a life. Our marriage had become a silent arrangement. Like two actors in a scene we no longer believed in. Mornings passed without warmth. Just the sound of him sipping coffee and scrolling through headlines. At night, we lay beside each other like strangers. Intimacy wasn't a spark, it was a duty. A timed routine. Like taking vitamins. I stopped asking him how he was. He stopped pretending to care. I became invisible in my own home. My own body. Yearning for something, anything, that reminded me I was still alive. The loneliness didn't scream, it simmered. Slow and suffocating. I wrapped myself in routines. Candles, soft jazz, warm baths, but nothing could quiet the ache. I didn't go looking for temptation. I only wanted to be seen. Felt. Needed. The kind of need that lingers in a glance. That draws breath from you when the other person enters the room. And just when I thought that part of me was gone forever, Archie returned home. And with him came the slow burn of something I never expected. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't ignore. When Archie arrived for summer break, the house exhaled. The stillness broke, not in noise, but in presence. He walked through the door with his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Tousled hair, and a lopsided grin that once felt boyish, but now lingered with a maturity I hadn't expected. He'd grown into himself, shoulders broader, voice deeper, eyes sharper, and yet, it wasn't just the physical change that unsettled me. It was the way he looked at me. Not like a child greeting his stepmother. Not anymore. His gaze lingered a moment too long when I welcomed him. His hug felt warmer, tighter. He smelled of campus cologne and sunlight. And when he pulled away, I felt the ghost of his arms still around me. The first few days, we moved cautiously around each other. I'd catch him watching me while I cooked, his eyes flickering over my curves before darting away. He tried to act casual, but the tension grew with every shared glance, every accidental brush in the hallway. Every moment when Clinton's absence felt louder than ever. I found myself dressing differently, looser tops that slipped off one shoulder. Softer fabrics that clung when I moved. I told myself it was just the heat. Just comfort. But deep down, I knew I was reacting to something. To him. One evening, I stood at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta. Archie leaned against the kitchen island, sipping soda and watching me. I could feel his gaze like fingertips against my skin. I turned to ask him to grab a plate, and his hand brushed mine, just for a second, but long enough to send a jolt up my spine. Our eyes met. Neither of us moved. "You've really changed," I said softly, trying to shift the air, the weight of the moment. "So have you," he replied, voice low. "You seem different." Different, yes. Alive, maybe. Seen. I laughed nervously and turned back to the stove. Heart racing, face warm. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was harmless. But as I set the table and felt his gaze trail me like heat, I knew something had begun to stir, slow and dangerous. Something that wouldn't go away. And I wasn't sure I wanted it to. It happened in the hallway, simple, sudden, and irreversible. I had just stepped out of the bathroom, steam still clinging to my skin, towel wrapped snug around my chest. My hair dripped onto the floor in lazy droplets. And the house, I thought, was empty. Clinton was in Chicago. Archie was supposed to be out for a run. But he wasn't. He stood at the end of the hallway, frozen mid-step, a glass of water in his hand. His eyes met mine, and everything stilled. For a breathless second, neither of us moved. Then his gaze, slow, hesitant, dropped. It traced the towel, the slope of my collarbone, the damp curve of my thigh where the fabric ended. And when it snapped back to my face, It wasn't embarrassment I saw. It was hunger. I should have turned away. I should have said something, anything, to break the tension. But my feet were rooted. My breath caught. The hallway felt unbearably narrow. The space between us charged like a wire humming with electricity. I felt the flush crawl up my neck. But not from shame. No, this was something else. A heat that pulsed just beneath the skin. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, but no words came. The glass in his hand trembled slightly, catching a flicker of light as it shifted. His knuckles were white. I took a slow step forward. Not toward him, just toward my room, but even that movement felt like a signal. His eyes followed me. I didn't mean to, he stammered. I paused in the doorway, the heat from the shower still clinging to my body. My towel clutched tighter around me. I turned just slightly, enough to glance back at him. It's okay, I said softly, my voice nearly lost in the thick silence. But it wasn't okay, and we both knew it. Because in that moment, something passed between us, quiet but undeniable. A shift. A flicker of a line not yet crossed, but already blurred. He stayed frozen in the hallway as I slipped into my room and closed the door behind me. My back pressed against the wood, my heart hammering in my chest. And all I could think was how long it had been since anyone looked at me like that. After the hallway, something changed, something unspoken, but ever present. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than words. We began to orbit each other with new awareness. He lingered in doorways when I passed. I moved slower when he was near. In the kitchen, I'd reach past him for spices, my arm brushing his. In the laundry room, he'd hand me a shirt to fold, our fingers grazing for just a second too long. Each moment was harmless on its own, small, subtle things, but together. They built a tension so thick it was suffocating. He watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, eyes tracing the shape of my hips when I bent to reach the bottom shelf. I caught those stolen glances in the glass of the oven door, in the reflection of a window pane, and each time, it sent a pulse through me, sharp and undeniable. He was nervous. I could feel it in the way his breath caught when I passed. The way he fumbled words around me now. But he didn't pull away. Neither did I. One afternoon, I dropped a spoon on the kitchen floor. I bent to pick it up, aware of the towel I'd wrapped around my waist after a swim in the backyard pool. Archie stood by the fridge, water bottle in hand. When I straightened, I saw his reflection, his gaze locked on the curve of my back. His jaw clenched. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Later that night, we crossed paths on the stairs. I was in a robe. He was in a fitted t-shirt and sweats, his hair still damp from a shower. We both paused, mid-step, inches apart. The space between us was thin, almost electric. "Night," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Night," he replied, but he didn't move, neither did I. Our eyes held for just a second too long. The air charged and warm. I could hear his breath, shallow and uneven, could feel the way his body tensed to keep still. Then I turned and walked away, heart racing, skin flushed. I told myself it was harmless, that we were just caught in the heat of the moment. But I knew better. We were playing with fire. And neither of us wanted to stop. It started with subtle choices, too subtle to feel guilty, too intentional to be innocent. I began to test him, not out of cruelty, but curiosity and longing. One morning, I came down to the kitchen wearing an old tank top that clung a little too well in the morning light. My hair was still damp, my skin cool from a shower. Archie sat at the table, half awake, scrolling his phone. He looked up, and his gaze stalled, just for a second, on my chest before darting back to the screen. I moved to the counter, pretending not to notice, though every nerve in my body was aware of him. I reached for the coffee mugs on the top shelf, deliberately stretching just enough for my shirt to lift slightly. I heard his breath catch. "Can you grab the sugar?" I asked without turning around, my voice light, almost playful. He got up quickly, too quickly, and nearly knocked over the chair. When our hands met over the sugar jar, my fingers brushed his just a moment longer than necessary. I glanced up. His eyes locked on mine, and he looked like a man caught between instinct and restraint. "You okay?" I asked, my tone casual, but my heart thudding beneath the surface. "Yeah, just tired," he mumbled. But we both knew it wasn't fatigue. Later that week, I sat beside him on the couch while we watched a movie. A comedy, something safe, but I leaned just slightly too close, our thighs touching. I laughed at a joke and let my hand rest on his arm for just a second too long. His body stiffened beneath my touch, but he didn't move away. "You're quiet," I said, almost a whisper. "You used to talk more." He turned his head to look at me, and the space between us felt impossibly small. "I'm just trying not to say the wrong thing," he replied, his voice rough around the edges. That answer lingered in the air long after the movie ended. Inside me, something dangerous was blooming, something I hadn't felt in years. A hunger to be wanted. Not out of duty, like with Clinton, but out of sheer, aching desire. I told myself it was harmless. Just a little heat in the quiet. But in the dim glow of the living room, with Archie sitting beside me, his breath shallow and skin flushed, I knew I was lying. The house was quiet, too quiet. Clinton had just called, his voice distant, distracted, already immersed in New York meetings. "Another week," he said, no apology, no warmth, just logistics. I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand, a hollow ache blooming in my chest. I wandered the hallway barefoot, the wood cool beneath my skin. The lights were dim, the only sound a faint hum of the TV from downstairs. My hand grazed the wall as I passed each closed door, and then I stopped, in front of his. Archie's. I told myself I was just checking in, that I'd say goodnight, ask if he needed anything. But my hand wrapped around the doorknob before I could talk myself out of it. I didn't knock. I opened it. He looked up from his bed, startled. A book rested open on his lap, a soft playlist murmuring from his speaker. His eyes widened when he saw me, barefoot, in a loose robe that barely clung to one shoulder. "Sorry," I said, too quickly, "I just couldn't sleep." He sat up straighter, setting the book aside. "That's okay," he said quietly, his voice almost tentative. I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. He watched me as I walked toward the window, pretending to look at the moonlight. I could feel his gaze trace the curve of my back, the way the robe swayed with each step. My heart pounded, my body alert in a way it hadn't been in years. "It's nice having someone else in the house again," I said softly, not turning around. "Yeah," he replied, "it feels different now." I turned then, slowly. Our eyes met. The air between us thickened. My fingers played with the edge of my robe. A nervous habit, but this time, I didn't stop myself. The fabric shifted slightly, revealing the edge of bare thigh. He noticed. His breath hitched. I walked closer, each step echoing louder in my chest. When I reached his bed, I sat on the edge, close but not touching. "Is this okay?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, not with words. He just reached for my hand, gently, like it might vanish, and held it in his. That was the moment. The line wasn't blurred anymore. It was crossed. Silently. Completely. And there was no going back. Our encounters became quiet rituals, unspoken, careful, laced with heat and wrapped in guilt. Behind closed doors, time felt different, slower. He would knock once, soft and low, before slipping into my room after midnight, or I'd find myself outside his, barefoot, robe drawn tight, heart pounding as I crossed a line that no longer startled me. We never spoke about what we were doing. We didn't label it. It lived in glances, in fingertips tracing bare skin beneath tangled sheets. It was in the way Archie looked at me, not like a boy chasing impulse, but like a man trying to understand something too big for words. In his presence, I was no longer invisible. He touched me with care, like I might fall apart if he wasn't gentle. He listened, really listened, when I spoke about the years with Clinton. About the loneliness that came from sleeping beside someone who'd long since forgotten how to reach for you. Archie would hold me afterward, his arms strong and tentative, his breath warm on my neck. There were moments I caught myself smiling for no reason, at the stove. Folding laundry, rinsing fruit at the sink, remembering the way his hands had mapped my body the night before. I told myself it was wrong, that I should stop, but the guilt never outweighed the craving. One evening, I found him in the laundry room, pulling clothes from the dryer. I stepped in, shutting the door behind me. He looked up, startled, then softened when he saw me. I walked to him, slowly, my fingers grazing the edge of the warm dryer as I passed. No words, just movement. He pressed me gently against the wall, his mouth meeting mine like he'd been waiting all day. The hum of the machines, the heat from the dryer, it all blurred into the fire between us. His hands slid under my shirt, familiar now, confident, mine tangled in his hair as I pulled him closer, breathless and needing. When it was over, we stood there in the quiet, our foreheads touching, hearts still racing. He whispered, "I don't want this to be just a secret." And yet, we both knew it had to be. Because outside that room, nothing made sense. But inside it, he made me feel like I mattered. And for now, that was enough. We were reckless, too wrapped up in the illusion that the world we'd created behind closed doors was real. Untouchable. We thought we had more time. Clinton wasn't supposed to be back until Monday. A conference, a board meeting, his schedule had become so fluid, so distant, I stopped tracking it. That afternoon, the house was warm, sunlight pouring through the windows, music humming low from the kitchen speaker. Archie stood between my legs as I sat on the counter, a cutting board pushed aside, a half-sliced tomato forgotten. His hands held my hips like he belonged there, like he knew me. Our lips moved hungrily, like we'd been starving all day. His fingers tangled in my hair. Mine gripped the back of his neck. The taste of him, the feel of him, it had become addictive. And in that moment, we weren't thinking of anything else. Not consequences, not betrayal. Only us. So when the door opened, the unmistakable click of a suitcase wheel against the floor, we didn't react in time. Clinton's voice called out casually, "I forgot my..." Then silence. I froze. Archie turned, his body still pressed to mine, hands still on my thighs. Clinton stood in the doorway, his briefcase still in hand, eyes wide with a disbelief that turned to devastation in seconds. Time slowed. He didn't speak right away. His gaze flicked between us, my flushed skin, Archie's grip on my body. The guilty way we peeled apart but far too late. "What?" he said finally, his voice sharp and cutting. "The hell is this?" Archie stepped back, stumbling, words caught in his throat. My feet touched the floor, but my knees were weak. "It's not what it looks like," I whispered. But even I didn't believe it. Clinton let out a hollow laugh, like something inside him had cracked. "Really? Because it looks exactly like my wife and my son," he choked on the word. "Doing something unforgivable." The room was suffocating. I opened my mouth to explain, but there was no version of this that made sense. No excuse that could dull the sharp edge of betrayal in his eyes. We had crossed every line, and now, the fallout had arrived. Not in silence, not in slow glances, but in the cold, shattering truth of being seen. Clinton didn't yell. That's what struck me first. He just stood there, staring at us like we were strangers. Like the two people in front of him, his wife, his son, had morphed into something grotesque. Something he couldn't make sense of. His eyes were glassy but unblinking. Jaw clenched tight. The rage was there, yes, but buried beneath it was something heavier. Something that made my stomach twist. Betrayal. Heartbreak. He dropped the briefcase. The sound echoed through the room like a gavel falling. "Get out," he said. The words didn't come out in a roar. They landed soft, but final, sharp as a blade. I took a breath to speak, to beg for explanation, forgiveness, anything, but I couldn't find the words. My voice caught in my throat, drowned by the weight of shame and consequence. Beside me, Archie stood motionless, shoulders tense, fists clenched at his sides. He didn't look like the man who had just kissed me with fire minutes ago. He looked like a child caught in the wreckage, ashamed, lost, afraid. "Dad," he managed, his voice shaking. "No." Clinton held up his hand, silencing him. "Don't call me that right now." Archie flinched like he'd been slapped. And in that moment, something inside me cracked wide open. I'd done this. To both of them. "I'm sorry," I whispered, barely able to speak. My legs trembled as I took a step forward. But Clinton recoiled. "Don't," he snapped, sharper now, the fury rising. "Don't insult me with apologies when you made a choice. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate." His voice trembled, not from weakness, but restraint. I could see the war in his eyes. The devastation of trust torn apart. The pain of watching two people you love burn your world down, and then stand there like they don't know how the fire started. "I can't even look at you right now," he said. "Either of you, get out of my house. Just go." The air in the kitchen turned frigid. Archie looked at me, waiting, for strength, for direction, for anything. But I had nothing to give. We walked out, slowly, silently, not hand in hand, not as lovers. Just as two people stripped of everything, trailing the smoke of a life we'd set ablaze. The house is quieter now, but not the kind of quiet that soothes. This quiet aches. It wraps around me like a second skin, suffocating and cold, pressing in from the corners of every room Clinton and I once pretended to share. The kitchen feels especially haunted. I still sit at the same table most nights, nursing a glass of wine I never finish, fingers trailing the wood grain like I'm trying to remember who I used to be. The air carries echoes, Archie's laugh, Clinton's voice on the phone, the low hum of forbidden whispers after midnight. But now, silence. Archie left the morning after everything unraveled. He didn't say goodbye, just packed what little he'd brought. Left his room barely touched, except for a single t-shirt still draped on the chair by the window. I haven't moved it. I can't. Clinton followed 2 days later. After saying nothing and saying everything with just his eyes, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Like he still couldn't quite believe the person he built a life with had lit a match beneath it. The worst part isn't the loss, it's the memory. I still feel Archie's hands, hesitant at first, then desperate, like touching me made the world make sense. I still feel his breath on my shoulder, the weight of him beside me, the way he'd hold me after, like I was the only thing keeping him steady. And I still hear Clinton's voice, the crack in it, the moment disbelief gave way to devastation. Sometimes, late at night, when the house creaks from old wood and wind, I pause, I hold my breath, I imagine the soft knock at my door, the turn of a doorknob, Archie's voice saying my name like a question. But it never comes. I tell myself I deserve this silence, that I made my choices, that I fed the hunger and let it consume everything. And yet, there are nights when I miss him, not just the heat, the thrill, but the way he saw me, the way he looked at me, like I was something rare. Now I'm just alone, a woman with too many memories, a house full of ghosts, and a silence that won't let me forget.